Hello guys, in this video I want to share some of my thoughts about shields in God of War Ragnarok. I will go through my personal experience, pros, cons and builds where I find those shields useful. After I will rank them because tops and lists is the thing YouTube likes, but don't let this ranking fool you, all shields are actually pretty good and have their unique applications and playstyles. I will start from Dauntless Shield since it's the closest thing we can get to generic shield, so I will be using it as a benchmark. On the surface, the only thing we can tell about it that it benefits parry. If you perform a perfect parry, it will deal more stun damage in return. What game doesn't tell us is that it actually gets charged when you parry. If you perform a regular parry, it will glow yellow, and if perfect parry, it will glow red. This charge gets released with Shield Strike and deals an insane amount of stun damage. Speaking of Shield Strike, for this shield it comes out pretty fast and has a decent range. You may not notice the difference in range initially, but switching to Guardian Shield from Dauntless Shield actually cost me a couple of runs, where I overestimated Shield Bash range. What game also doesn't tell us is that if perfectly parried, some of the combos will be interrupted when regular parry won't. Its secondary parameter is cooldown, and I would say it's one of the best and most generic options here. There is no build that won't benefit from extra cooldown. So, to sum up, pros: great stun damage, ability to interrupt some combos with perfect parry, fast and long range shield strike, available early in the game, best possible secondary stat. Cons? No, there are no downsides to this shield. When to use Dauntless Shield? Whenever. It is absolutely must-have for stun and cooldown builds. For cooldown build, it combines really well with Round of Expedition, but it won't be let down in any other build. Great option overall. Next on the list is a Stonewall Shield, and I have a weird love-hate relationship with this one. First of all, for context, I haven't even touched this shield until I started my third playthrough. At the beginning, I was very happy with how this played. I love parry bosses, but I was too lazy to get used to regular enemies' timings. So, it always was a bit a struggle. Not with this shield. It makes life during exploration so much easier. All you need to do is to make sure you discharge it from time to time. And oh boy, the shield strike is insane. It will deal solid damage in a massive area. But the kicker is, it launches enemies into the air, exposing them to air juggling. Though I have to mention, stun damage is underwhelming, so I would not recommend using this shield for stun builds. Bosses, on the other hand, a different story. So this ability to block breaker attacks may sound good at first, but it's only until you realize it comes with the cost of a parry. You still can parry with Stonewall Shield. The problem is, it will have this interrupting effect only when fully charged, and that may cause some problems. The example coming to mind is Gna's charging block breaker attack. If parried, her attack is interrupted, but if not, she will spin and hit you again. So, if you have all 4 charges on the Stonewall Shield, you are fine, you just parry it as normal. If you have 0 or 1 charge, you are fine as well, you just stay in the block. But if you have 2 or 3 charges, trouble is coming. You don't have 4 charges to parry yet, but then the first attack will fully charge your shield, so if you just stay in the block, the second attack will break it. What to do? I don't know. Dodge first attack, or accept broken posture and counter follow-up with rage. Point is, the Stonewall Shield makes some things more complicated when you fight bosses. Worth mentioning Vitality is Stonewall Shield's secondary stat. It is not as good as cooldown, but it's still fairly generic and can be beneficial for any build. So, quick overview: great for fights with multiple enemies, good second stat, massive area shield strike that launches enemies in the air, available really early in the game. Cons: no projectile deflect, questionable experience on bosses, and quite a low stun damage. Moving on to Shatter Shield. This one of the least loved shields in community poll I created, and no surprise to that. It lacks projectile deflection and, from the surface, doesn't offer much in exchange, but it becomes more fun as you figure out how to use it. First, let's get the secondary stat out of the way, Runic. While it is useful in most of the builds, its value for non-runic cooldown builds is not that great. So yeah, I guess that's just it. Ability to move fast with shield up, I find it's an underused one. You don't think about it a lot, and then when you need to move somewhere, you just do regular thing, exposing yourself to the enemies. And this is a big mistake. As I stopped skipping on moving with shield up, I realized how much safer a lot of my exploration encounters were. And shield strike, not charge strike, is nothing special. It has a bit of AoE, decent range, and deals about the same damage as any other shield when they are not charged. The key is charge shield. You charge it just by holding it up, but charge is getting drained if you block. If you manage to charge it fully, it will do very solid stun damage and throw enemies away, opening some breathing space. What game doesn't tell you about this shield, that it also gets charged if you parry with it. So the combination of parry and fast movement actually makes it more realistic to charge it fully. One of the combos I really like, and I was mentioning it in my stun build video, is this shield with Rondo Fortification. Rondo Fortification also charges when the shield is up and takes just a bit longer than fully charged shield. And trust me, if you manage to charge both, your shield strike will unleash hell of a stun damage. I would consider this shield for stun build, especially for regular encounters. It makes things safer when not compromising on stun damage like a Stonewall Shield, and of course for runic builds just for the secondary stat. This shield can be found fairly early in the game, but not super early. So, to sum up, pros. Unique fast movement with shield up skill helps to be safe during regular encounters. Decent AoE and range of the shield strike. And, of course, potential to unleash massive stun damage. Cons, no projectile deflect, and it's fairly hard to charge. Next one on the list is Guardian Shield. And first of all, look at it. Classic round shape. Makes you feel like a Viking when you hold the axe, or a Spartan when you hold the spear. I would choose this shield just for the looks, but it is actually another great generic shield that fits a lot of builds. This is the only shield that doesn't have actually a charge mechanic that makes the shield strike stronger. This shield strike always deals same damage, but what it does have in exchange is the counterattack after parry, and it is insanely good. After parry, you may perform instant light or heavy follow-up that will deal solid damage, but there are a couple of crazy mechanics the games doesn't tell us in the first place. First, those follow-ups interrupts almost any move the enemy is doing, like almost any boss. Converting experience with carefully deflecting every attack in a sequence into the single parry with counter. Another thing the game doesn't tell us is that during those counters, you are in iframes. The entire animation. It may not be such a big deal on the bosses, because you're going to counter them anyway, but it is extremely important when you face multiple enemies, and you don't want to be damaged by a projectile flying your way during your counter. But not everything that great. There were a couple of downsides I noticed while playing with it. Let's get the obvious out of the way first. No secondary stat, deal with it. Second problem is not as visible, but caused me some big troubles. Shield strike. And I'm not talking about the fact it can't be charged. Yes, it is not great for stun builds, but not that much of a problem for anything else. I am talking about the range of shield strike. It is ridiculously short. I can't count how many times I screwed up by misjudging distance when I switched from Dauntless Shield to Guardian Shield. So overall, pros, counter interrupt enemy combos, even bosses. Counter provides iframes. Cons, no secondary stat, short range of shield strikes, and it available quite late in the game. And last but not least, the Onslaught Shield. It was the last one I properly tried, and I actually loved it a lot. It is actually a tool of a great convenience. You can not worry about the range of bosses' blue ring attacks. You can safely get to an enemy to finish them, which is a big deal on Give Me God of War difficulty, where damaged enemies can buff themselves if you don't keep pressure on them. It will not only get you there, but also will launch it in the air, so you can start your air juggle combo. Couple of mechanics game doesn't tell you about, but you probably know, but it's worth spelling it out anyway. First, Shield Rush is considered sprinting, so if you hold the axe during it, you can instantly charge it with triangle. For the same reason, you can cancel it by performing an attack, if you want so. In this case, Kratos will perform a sprint attack with the weapon he holds. This unlocks tons of combos that can be performed in a much safer manner. Need to mention secondary stat, luck. I would say this is the most useless one unless you play luck build. But if luck impacts your build, it's a great one, because luck is not as easy stat to crank high. So, summary. Pros: convenience with shield bash distance, ability to chase enemy safely, great tool for combos. Cons: no projectile deflect, available really late in the game, questionable secondary stat. Okay, as promised, ranking. But before that, two things. First, I have to reiterate one more time that I enjoyed all the shields, and I think regardless of where I put it, you owe yourself to try all of them. Second, well, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. This is really helpful for me and the channel. Okay, to the list. Dead last I placed Shatter Star Shield, mostly due to the fact that it never became natural for me to use all of its perks. It kept occupying my brain space, and considering I have a brain of a goldfish, that's quite a lot of space. Number 4 is a Stonewall Shield. I absolutely love it in multiple enemies encounters, but fights with Gna and Hrolv proved to be a bit too hard for me with this shield. Third place I give to Onslaught Shield for its great convenience and combo capabilities. There is no shield that allows more aggressive gameplay than this one. And oof, first and second is the hard one, but I'm going to give the first one to Guardian Shield. I love counters way too much, and the looks. Nothing better than a classic round shield. Anyways, here it is. Have a good one, and see you in the next video.